Hope that's okay. Yeah. Welcome everybody. Brainfood Live on air. It is episode 175, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. I am super excited to be having this conversation with you today because this is a topic that actually I've been waiting for an excuse to do. Because I've always been interested in this world. Ever since the first sort of inkling that crypto was coming onto the market. I was always interested in dabbling into this space, and it's been amazing to see how it's developed over the last 10 years or so, particularly in how it might be applied to the world of work. What better opportunity to have this conversation than on the day of Future Works, which is a conference that myself and several of the panelists should be attending right now. However, we've decided to all do the live stream from our respective hotel rooms in order to make sure that we don't have Wi-Fi issues or background noise issues and so on and so forth. We're all, I think, pretty close to where this thing is. So we're going to be going to this conference after this event. Anyway, folks, great to see everybody. Wonderful that everyone is here. As ever, we need to do some sound checks. So before we get on with the show, I just want to confirm everyone can hear me okay. The last webinar I did, I heard, so I rewatched it, and actually the sound quality on my side was really bad. So I just wanted to double check whether you can hear me okay, and I'm not at the bottom of a well or something. I'm pretty certain I've damaged my mic, by the way. So it could well be that the quality of the sound is really bad. But yeah, let me know. I actually don't know what the case is there. We should be live streaming this on multiple channels. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, let me know. We snafu'd it last time where I thought we would be live on LinkedIn when we weren't. I do blame LinkedIn for that because there was a bug on the system. But I hope that this is going out. I can see it on my phone, so it looks like it's okay. If you can hear me on LinkedIn, though, let me know. Put a comment in. Just reassure me that the audio and visual is okay. Okay, cool. Apologies for the bed scene, by the way. It's not my intention to present this type of content to you. And I'm sat in front of a window, and it's Lisbon, so I don't think I've ever looked more white than this. So apologies for the glare as well. But we do what we can. Okay. I think everyone here is okay, which is great. Listen, folks. Quick word to our sponsors. We cannot do this show without our sponsors. Every single week, some company is stepping up and saying, "Yes, we want to support what you're doing." So I want to give a big shout out to all of the folks that are doing it. This week, it is Adway. If you haven't heard of adway.ai, please do check them out. They are, I think, the only organization that does programmatic social advertising. So if you think about how programmatic works, essentially it is about deployment of recruitment ads or employment branding ads in places that is algorithmically programmatically, should I say, deployed. So it's not a human being deciding to place it in certain places. They figure out who your audience is and stick it into the place where they're most likely to see it. You can do it programmatically, and you can do it on social media with adway.ai. So make sure you check them out. They're a really innovative product coming out of Sweden in Gothenburg, and yeah, it's a really exciting spot if you're looking to interact with candidates in a totally different way. Okay, let's get on with the show. Today's topic is blockchain, Web3, and the future of work. I don't know enough about it, but the guests that we have on the show today do know something about it. So let's bring them on, and we'll get on with the conversation. Okay, let's bring on Pedro first of all. Let's bring him on. There we go. I do see certainly one of the Ines's here. Oh, I do believe there's an accent there, so I got to figure this out. Okay, let me just pick up this accent. There we go. Two. That's really interesting. It actually picks up accents on the search bar here. So I need to. Hey Pedro, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm trying to, you know how you do accents on keyboards where you got to pick it up, but it actually eliminates it if you just don't do it. So how interesting is that? Quite tricky. We have Andy Spence here as well. He's just Andy. Let's bring him on. And I do think I've seen Fem here as well. So let's do that as well. Denmark's lag. Boom. I think we're all here. Pedro, as you're on first, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
I do a lot of things. So the name is Pedro. I'm actually born and raised in Lisbon, so Lisbon native. If you want to know anything about it, ask Andy because he's the new local, so he's more up to date about Lisbon than I am. And I've been recently building Talent Protocol, which is essentially a Web3 professional community for builders, where people can not only set up their Web3 profile and homepage, but also create their own career circles and create their own personal economies around
Yeah.
themselves. If this sounded complex, it's okay. No
It
worries.
totally sounded complex, and we actually want to talk about that without
Yes.
being a major promo of TP. But it is actually really interesting because it's one of the examples of how you go and actually use these technologies to do something very, very different. So we'll get into that. I've just shared Pedro's LinkedIn, by the way, which is, by the way, not Web3, but just to connect with him anyway, because you might as well. Okay. Okay, let's go with you, Inesh. Let's see. Can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, first of all, great to be here. Very excited with this conversation. So my name is Inês. I'm from Porto, the north of Portugal, so not too far away. It's less sunny here, less sunny than Lisbon. I'm one of the co-initiators of the Tina DAO. In the past, I've done a lot of work around diversity and inclusion in tech, in business, and have worked also a lot in the future of work. So yeah, very excited to be here.
Fantastic, great to by the way, I'd love to visit Porto. I hear so many amazing things about it, but Lisbon draws me here all the time. It's quite annoying. Even though I love Lisbon, it's like, okay, I need to actually explore different places. Okay, cool. Andy, why don't you go? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hi everybody, great to be here. Andy Spence. I guess I've worked in digital transformation for a lot of my career. Most recently, researching the future of work trends, including the new technology infrastructure we need to build, which includes blockchain, AI, and other stuff. So yeah, and I'm going to go to FutureWorks in Lisbon for the next couple of days. Looking forward to that.
That's right, and you're giving a keynote tomorrow, aren't you?
I am building a future of work without jobs. So a little bit controversial, but looking forward to that.
Absolutely scandalous. All the recruiters out here who are totally dependent on jobs, like, immediately think, who is this guy? Okay, let's how about you, Fem? Great to meet you. I don't think we've actually had the chance to meet before, so great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Fem, Dutch, living in London. Is my mic off or on?
It's on.
Okay, good. So I've been in recruitment for 15 plus years in the people field, specialized start scale-ups. Last few years, fintech, and dipped in crypto, blockchain, and Web3. Worked for both a protocol, Wire, and currently part of Cryptio.
Great stuff. And it's really interesting to see recruiters actually develop a niche into this sector as well, which tells me that there's some unique aspects towards interacting with people that work in this space that may mean different things, different techniques, different approaches, different conversations you need to have in order to recruit them effectively. So that's fantastic stuff. Welcome to the panel, everybody. Let's kick off by laying sort of the scene. I think whenever we encounter something like blockchain or something that's reasonably relatively new, very quickly it can get into a jargonized type of scenario. People might not understand it. Accessibility becomes an issue because early movers tend to become very deep into it and then end up failing to communicate with people who are just moving into it for the first time. So why don't we just lay out the landscape and to tell people what exactly is Web3, where are we with blockchain, give it the landscape view. Andy, I wonder whether you could take this one, actually, given the fact that this is kind of your profession. So are you able to kind of summarize something that's accessible to, my ma, maybe? I don't know, maybe not my ma. I don't think she's ever going to get any blockchain. But, somebody who's barely digitally aware, but encountering, what is Web3? What is this? Why is it different? How would you kind of talk to that person?
All right, Mrs. Lee. I first got into the blockchain about 5 years ago. I read as much as I could, and I was really intrigued. And the first thing that occurred to me is, oh my God, this could be so useful for HR and work. All the contracts, all the checking, the poor use of data, all the inefficiencies in the labor market, right? So it's, if we had a perfect work matching system, we'd be able to find the ideal graphic designer or coder just from using the systems. But we're not in that position for different reasons. And I wrote an article, I think publicly, as you know, and about 5 years ago, and it caused a lot of interest. And Don Tapscott wrote to me. He's a management guru who's written loads of brilliant books around this, to write a paper about the impact of blockchain in HR. And he asked a lot of people in different industries to apply it. And what it was a critique of internet business models in the airline industry and marketing. And I applied that critique to HR. And what it's all about isn't the jargon of Web 2, Web 3. Let's forget that. It's basically looking at how an industry uses data, how it uses intermediaries, how it incentivizes people. And that's the stuff that I'm really interested in. And blockchain can play a really important part. And the early use cases are things like having a CV or resume that is verifiable, and it's verified on decentralized nodes, basically using blockchain technology. So there's more trust in it. Singapore are rolling out this kind of technology, which will change the way we recruit, because it changes the way we use platforms. So that's very interesting. User-owned platforms. So we have tokens to encourage people to use the platforms to build communities. And the entrepreneurial side is us 5 on the call, or maybe listeners, could create a DAO. We could get tokens. We could create a network. We can share the equity when we become rich with each other, and all the rest of it. Now that is really exciting. And my keynote tomorrow is around the end of jobs, but basically saying we need loads of revenue streams for people, not just job income. We can get paid from clicking ads with a Brave browser and get tokens and things like that. So we need multiple revenue streams, loads of ways of learning, and more efficient plumbing for the labor market. And there's my summary. How's that, Mrs. Lee?
She ain't got any of that, mate. And God bless my ma, but not a single clue on that. But that's fine. I think you've laid out some really important terms that we need to wrestle with, and hopefully during the course of this conversation, we'll dig into it further. I do particularly like the idea of diversifying the revenue streams. That's actually a really topical, and also I think pretty much like a COVID accelerant scenario, hasn't it? Loads of people got made redundant. We suddenly became very aware that our vulnerability to having a single source of supply for revenue is not necessarily the best idea. And everyone since then has been doing some sort of sideline, haven't they? So folks, people watching this, have you got a sideline? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be interested to know whether you've experimented with something that is outside of your predominant revenue stream that you think, maybe something can happen. Let me know there. I'll be interested to know sort of what the general appetite is for this. By the way, recruiting Brainfood is entirely a sideline, and it's entirely that way. It emerged from that scenario, so it's totally doable. But yeah, okay. Let's rewind back to what blockchain is. Inesh, I wonder whether you could give this a stab. Andy's talking about, you can do definitely verify, it's more trustworthy, etc. Why is that the case? Why do I want to trust some data that's on a blockchain compared to, I don't know, a relational database or something?
Yeah, I think it all comes also down to scale. I think a lot of the times, what we are we have intermediaries that we trust, or somehow we need to trust to actually deal with others. So what blockchain allows us to do is to cut the intermediaries and do relationships on a scale that before were very difficult to do or almost impossible. So for example, I think I'm going to give you a very interesting use case of something that I'm doing right now. Is I'm one of the co-initiators of Athena DAO. We are a group of women that are all around the world. Some of us we actually met in person, others we haven't. But we decided to come together because we had this idea, this purpose of, in our case, invest and fund women's health research. And what we are able to do with this blockchain infrastructure is to actually collaborate on chain in a very transparent way, and do it from all around the world. And I think that's actually something that is very different from whatever we could do before. Of course, we have international companies and big corporations for a long time, but now us individually, we can actually do this collaboration very transparent in a very safe way, and also and do things that before were very hard to do.
And the key thing for me, and by the way, everyone feel free to sort of interject at this point. The key thing for me seems to be this notion of decentralization, isn't it? Because what we might understand as Web 2, and forgive me, Andy, for using the terminology, but Web 2 basically involves these huge sort of megacorps, the big tech companies that we talk about, Facebook's, Google's, and what have you. They're centralized systems. So that when we interact with them, even when we're collaborating with people in a kind of peer-to-peer way, if we're using that system, it's ultimately controlled by a centralized system. And they could do things to you. They could blast you off, for instance, right? We've seen a lot of actually with cancel culture is a good example, maybe a bad example, because some people maybe deserve to be canceled. But it is an example of the authority that the centralized platform has, where they can make the decision and they can make you go away. Where is the rules on that? It's not clear how that works, and it's certainly not clear how you might contest it. Because it might just be a disappear. And it's the same when you look at things like algorithmic bias on social media, for instance. Why am I getting this promotion in my feed and something else? How come I used to follow this person, I'm no longer seeming to follow them? Like, what's going on? We don't actually know, right? Because we have a centralized system. And one of the big value systems that one of the big values, I think, of Web3, again, apologies using the term, but is to say no one should have that power. It should be in a decentralized, distributed space, so that the community as a whole, if they have a problem with it, maybe they vote for it in some way, or maybe they can collectively make that decision, but there isn't a hierarchy for things to occur. So I think that's one of the things that really attracts people at a political level, doesn't it? Which is important to talk about. So let's bring it to you, Fem. How important is the political side of it when you're interacting with candidates? So, for instance, you're recruiting, I guess, people who work on Web3. That's the case because you've been working in these Web3 companies. Do you have political conversations with them? Is it important for them to, how do you interact with them, and how important is that side of things?
It kind of depends on what their background is, where they come from, and what they work on. I think the political side of things is something that comes natural when you speak about decentralization. What I do notice a lot with my candidates is that a lot of these people, I kind of feel there's two streams. When in the early, you've got the early adopters that are, they are for decentralization on many different levels in many different fields. There's also a stream of people that find the political part less interesting, and that's more the people that see, for instance, blockchain decentralization one-on-one, hand-in-hand with crypto, which for them means money. So there is this big buzzword around crypto, and a lot of people who just dip in or step into the Web3, the blockchain world. I've heard so many times, yeah, well, crypto and blockchain are kind of the same, right? Which is not the case. I know this is being used a lot of times, but it's basically email and the internet. Because of the internet, you can use email. Because of blockchain, there's crypto. And I think it depends on how important that political aspect becomes, is where the candidate comes from. Does that make sense?
I think I get what you're saying. I think there's a lot of people that basically are involved initially on blockchain, attracted by the potential returns you can get from cryptocurrency. I think there's no question that's the case. It was the first application of blockchain was Bitcoin, and no question that's still in if you like the mindscape of anybody thinking about Web3 is still, or maybe blockchain is the terminology, is still used for people that are fixated on crypto. Is that's still the predominant use case. So I think there's a lot of people that still, and obviously loads of news about cryptocurrency NFTs and stuff like that. A lot of it's driven through just this massive asset sort of increase. And perhaps that's also the case when you so the type of company that you're recruiting for, if it is, for instance, to do the currency, then presumably that's where the motivator and the driver is. How very interesting. How about anybody else? Any thoughts on the political side of it? I mean, go on, Pedro, go ahead.
I'm just saving myself. Like, I wanted to jump in right away. Sorry about that. Like, so let's take a step back. Web 2, I was just checking on Google. Web 2, the first reference appeared in 2004. So some people in this call will remember the web experience before that. Yes, it was amazing. You know, jail sites, all those things were great, but it was lacking a lot of stuff. So Web 2 is not a people in Web3, we don't think about Web2 as an evil, all right? So, and Web3 is not here to substitute, Web3 is not here to substitute Web2 at all. But I just wanted us to take that step and remember, you know, that Web2 did bring us, you know, HTML5, CSS3, and that brought, and JavaScript, you know, some people hate it, whatever, but that brought our internet experience to a whole new level. And this was even before mobile started picking up. So anyway, just that as a side note. And then I think it's very important for us to realize blockchain didn't appear from out of nowhere, right? Like distributed systems. My background is computer science. I was building them at uni, like even before blockchain appeared, the first paper. So there was a development process that ended up in a blockchain appears. What's new about blockchain, and Fem, you're totally right, attracted a certain type of people, is the crypto component, like the economy layer, that is changing all our society, in my opinion. And that, you know, does attract a certain type of person, let's call it like Wall Street type of individual, mostly men, that you know, I'm not one of them, but that do create a certain type of culture around crypto. And crypto does have a lot of bad feelings and bad vibes around the space, around blockchain, because yeah, you know, for a long time, the only utility that existed in the blockchain space was trading. You know, that was it, was mostly speculation. And I think Web3 is kind of the branding solution, also to give a second chance for people who hate crypto, and rightfully so, to say, hey guys, you know, this is a new thing, Web3, and you can stop hating on us. And there's a bunch of other things that you can do now. Like Andy and Inez just said, DAOs. It's a very interesting thing that is happening in the past couple of years, even a bit more maybe. And I think it's definitely going to change the future of work. Verified profiles, verified journeys. You know, LinkedIn as a Web3 team that my team is in contact with, their biggest problem is that people are doing background checks using LinkedIn data. Okay, because LinkedIn data is not verified at all. So if I want to be a major hero on LinkedIn, I can be. That's it. I just need an email, and I'm good to go. So I just wanted to give this this context. And one more thing. All of us in this call, we are super privileged. Why? I remember back in April, post-COVID, I went to my first conference in Barcelona for Celo Connect. Celo is one of the blockchains that exists. And Celo has this massive sustainability drive, right? So most of the attendees were from Africa, South America. And for them, crypto, blockchain, or Web3, whatever we want to call it, is a necessity. Like, they do not trust their entities. Their money, their coin sucks. So they need something else. And the fact that it's decentralized, it's the answer for them. So I think it's very important for us in this call to do that exercise of, you know, for us it's almost like an opportunity, but for other people, it's a need.
Well, I think that's a really well said, Pedro. So thank you for outlining that. I think it's inevitably political in the sense that you've mentioned, because there are people have a huge vulnerability in terms of their values and their assets and what have you. I remember back in the great financial crisis, for instance, where, you know, I thought that was maybe one of the first big kind of surges in Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin, when, you know, the Greek government kind of froze bank accounts and, you know, repossessed stuff and things like that on you know, normal bank consumers. And you thought, you know what, do you actually own this money that you worked really hard to, that they've already taxed, that you put into a bank and you think is yours, but actually no, it isn't. So there was a response really to people buying into Bitcoin at that point. It still is the case. It didn't surprise me when, you know, the UK government decided to crash the pound a couple of weeks ago, that there was a mini bump on the price of crypto at that point. So I totally get what you're saying. I think it's absolutely relevant. Cherry, thank you for your question. We're going to get to that towards the end of the show. So if anybody has any questions, by the way, use the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the Crowdcast tab, or if you're on LinkedIn, just put it in the thread and we'll get to them at the bottom of it. All super relevant. Okay, let's move this to sort of application of a blockchain into the world of work, things that we're most familiar with. And Andy, I think you mentioned it in the first instance about the idea that perhaps you can just get more verified information, as opposed to something that's completely unverified, which is CV or resume. Like we all know, when we just stop and think about it, how kind of weak the data is on a self-reported resume, right? Or even a LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is slightly better because you may be publicly challenged by other people, or they may kind of reject, you know, some of your commentary or what have you. But a document that you've created on yourself and you just sent randomly, that's completely unverified. Yet we accept that as the first thing. Now, how does something on blockchain? Why is that better than a CV? Any thoughts on this, Andy? Go to you.
Yeah, so currently you mentioned LinkedIn, which we all use in the recruitment community, of course, every day. We provide our data with our career summary on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, owned by Microsoft, then aggregates that data and sells it to recruiters and salespeople. So that's the centralized internet business model that so many businesses operate on. The decentralized version of that is I have a CV. It has things like courses I've done, employment history, which can be verified on a decentralized network, a little green tick to say that I've done that. And then I can choose to share that information on a work matching platform. So the employer has some trust that this is true. Now, as recruiters, you know that there are hundreds and thousands of potential data points for predicting whether someone is going to be a good recruit. It's not just my employment history or courses I've done. There's more data is needed. But for the verifiable stuff, we can actually do a much better job on that. And so I mentioned in the comments about the Velocity Foundation. I think every recruiter should know all about what's happening here in the industry. So can I just mention that a bit, about the Velocity Foundation? Or
you just have, so go ahead, go ahead, mate.
Well, I mean, it includes people like, you know, the big HR tech players, the big the Korn Ferries, Randstats, those kind of players, and they're agreeing standards to use for employment verification checks. And each of those companies has teams working on using this. It's gone live. It has a mainnet. It's gone live. And these are the kind of standards that are going to be developed in the industry for this. And their members include 1 billion workers. So it's very interesting to keep a watch on this as a solution. But that changes the game. That means that the matching networks become more efficient, and it changes the role of recruitment. It changes how we hire into organizations too. Over 10 and 20 years. This is a new version of internet business models. It will take time.
Yeah, so feel free to share the link into the chat stream, Andy. I think people would like to see it.
Yeah, I did actually.
Did you really? Okay, excellent. So I'm still not clear on why it's better though, because yes, it's verified, but what's the difference between, you know, having some industry body saying yes, we verify, like we give certificates out all the time, don't we? To say that's what a university degree is. It's like here's a verification that you've gone through this system. So why is something on chain more trustworthy than something off chain? Anybody?
I kind of feel it's because nobody can change it. So when it's there, it's there. And basically, you can only change them. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an absolute deep specialist, but once it's there, the only time you can completely change it, you can't pull it out. You can't change it. So then you will have to have the whole community say, "Hey, this is wrong," but that won't happen. So it will always be there. Nobody else can hack into it. Nobody else can take your information and copy it. Like, for instance, I get CVs where, because of Web3, the blockchain world is still relatively small. If you look at candidate pools, and there are CVs, when I put them next to each other, I'm like, I've seen this before. And you see that people tend to borrow from others' experience, for instance, from LinkedIn or from, to up their chances to get into Web3, get into crypto. Whereas in the blockchain, if it's there, it's there. And it's your proof, your key, your...
I think here's where we need to just explain a little bit on the technical side why this is. So as I understand blockchains, I'll give this a grab. So anybody listening to this who thinks I'm an idiot, please do literally heckle me on the comments. I don't mind you doing that. So the reason why it's called a blockchain is basically because in order to write to the system, you need to have everyone else accept your commit to that before it actually adds to the record in the database. So unlike having, let's imagine we're all sharing a spreadsheet, for instance. For me, in order to make an entry into that spreadsheet, every other person with access to that spreadsheet needs to confirm my entry is valid. Otherwise, it is not accepted. Once it is accepted, it exists as a permanent record on everyone else's copy of that spreadsheet. And the next person that wants to try and add another row, I then have to have the ability to verify that. And that is basically how it works as a blockchain. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. Now, if that's the case, it means that the data actually gets better and better as more people add to it, because it gets the verification gets stronger and stronger, given the fact more and more people are actually verifying it. And that I think what we're talking about in terms of having a system of trust, because it means that the information there is at least validated by everyone else who is sharing in that system. This is part of the reason why blockchain is slow, by the way, and part of the reason why cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin, is like hugely energy intensive, because the bigger the chain gets, the more energy, the more compute is required to add more blocks to it. Which is why there's all kinds of issues on the green tech side as well. But anyway, that's my understanding of how it works. So essentially, what you're saying, guys, is that there is a CV version of this. There's a way in which this can be done to verify someone's work experience, and that therefore is more trustworthy than someone just writing up a document in there.
And then it's the follow-up to that, Hung. So then what that enables is much bigger, elaborate, effective work matching systems. And from there, we get into the decentralized version of Upwork, Fiverr, in this kind of market. So we're going to see more powerful platforms for work matching. It enables this. And then the next question is, how does that change organizations and the firm, which is very interesting, but that's going into the future many, many years.
Also going into the past, I'm a big fan of Ronald Coase, man. And he wrote about the nature of the firm in the 1930s. And his big question was, why is there such a thing as a firm? Why are we not just a network of independent freelancers getting value from the market without having to basically get a small percentage of the value by this huge organization, which basically parcels out small percentage of it in terms of a salary? And he's got a really good explanation as to why that is the case. I'd recommend everyone check out Ronald Coase generally as an economist. He's got some really interesting things to say, and he would love seeing blockchain, by the way. He'd love to see a technology of this type, because I think
if he was alive.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, we can't resurrect the guy, at least not yet. But yeah, it would be someone I think we should all study, because he talks about the nature of the firm, and I think some of his analyses might actually be coming to pass with the implementation.
They are, and it's it was a big input into my paper, for example. But the implications of this is the firm gets really small, because searching, contracting, and coordinating costs have reduced down to zilch using these platforms and automation, which means the firm is really small. It can just pull from a liquid workforce when it needs it, with digital smart contracts, incentivization, payments, all that kind of stuff. So that is profound.
That note, by the way, is super interesting, because if you think about what we do in recruiting folks, we're trying to actually manually carry that information backwards and forwards to the market, from the market to the company, one person at a time. Is the person available? Is the person interested? Is the person capable? Like, we're literally doing that on the phone or on independent Zooms or whatever. Like, millions of recruiters worldwide. That's what we're doing. So instead of this, what we're trying to say is, you know what? We could potentially systematize it all, and be able to not just predict, but the blockchain will tell us whether the person's available and interested in
and let's throw in some AI into these models too, to say, you know, of these thousands of factors that could be used to predict who a good recruit will be in a particular team, in a particular context. Let's do that thousands of times and get better data and better prediction models too. Blockchain doesn't work in isolation from other technologies.
Yeah, one of my criticisms of blockchain. Sorry, Ines, you're about to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think this is completely like life-changing for like recruiters and for companies, also for people that are all around the world that want to work and want to have access to these opportunities. And suddenly they're like, the job market is open to them. I think like part of the promise of Web2 was like, okay, no matter where you are, you can actually build your company and work from all around the world. But I think now with Web3 is actually, that becomes much easier on one hand, and there is like a clear path to contribution that before was a little bit less transparent. So I think it's actually very important to also emphasize that suddenly, no matter where you are, with a good internet connection and with some skills, you can really access opportunities that before you didn't even know that they were available. And I think going back to what Pedro was mentioning of the fact that I think decentralized finance is definitely an amazing use case for people that are in countries that with institutions that cannot be trusted, with a currency that's not good or stable, but is also I think decentralized jobs, like the fact that you can work for companies, organizations around the world, I think definitely opens up a world of possibilities that before didn't exist. And I think that's very, very exciting.
Let's talk about one of those opportunities. Pedro, let's go to you. We've obviously known each other for a long time. You worked previously Web2 type era products, and which to great success. But now you've launched what looks like a Web3 sort of product. This is a direct application of the technology to human labor. So tell us a little bit about that. What is the concept behind TP? How does it fit in with the world that we've just kind of tried to sketch out here?
Yeah, I mean, tough question, by the way, because I'll try not to bring a complex answer to that one. Just before, if you allow me, I just want to comment on a couple of things. I took some notes before
okay.
On the green tech part of things. So Bitcoin is probably the only chain left that is not eco-friendly. Ethereum, the second biggest, just made a huge change, and it is right now. So that argument is less and less of an argument, all right? And there's one other thing we haven't talked about here, but it's almost like the way you build things in Ethereum is through smart contracts and Solidity, which basically essentially is what you tell about immutability. So essentially imagine having that contract on chain. I was recently in a lawyers conference, and this is going to change the way they work as well. Okay, so it's not only about HR, it's about every industry. So going back to your question, sorry about that. I just took some notes and I wanted to mention something on those two things. About Talent Protocol, look, when we first started, and you have to realize the way we built Talent Protocol is, first of all, is open source, and we've built it with our community, together with them. Some of you are part of it, Andy, Young, Inez, your suspicious folks in the audience, and we've been building it together. When we first started, we were building essentially a DApp, which is a decentralized app for investing into talent. That was it. Even the word investing is not the verb investing is not the right one, because the way that people invest in each other on Talent Protocol is by staking on each other. So in essence, it's almost like doing a recommendation or a vouch on LinkedIn, but it's on chain and it's putting your money where your mouth is. So having real skin in the game and building this career circles and social professional graphs where you can see the strengths of connections between people, and all on chain. So you can see like where this is going in terms of HR. If you don't, I think it's pretty obvious that for a recruiter, it's very interesting to see who connects with who and who's integrated, who's invested in other people. So that's the way we started. We've been learning a lot. So we started a bit over 1 year ago. We recently made an acquisition of another company. That's how fast things are in Web3 compared to building a startup in Web2. The speed, it's almost like speed of light in Web3. And essentially nowadays we are like, we have that component of, you know, creating career circles, and people to do that, they need to launch their tokens and people can stake on them. That's where the smart contracts come in. But we are raising the bar, let's put it like that. We're creating essentially a talent ecosystem. You can have your own immutable CV. We call it a Web3 homepage, whatever you want to call it. So all your contributions are in there, your journey is verified, and this, you know, facilitates the life for any recruiter. Like any recruiter would want to look at real data, real verified data. So that's one thing. But also all these connections together, I think it just creates, I don't want to compare to LinkedIn or Polywork, but it creates a new wave of this sort of platforms, but in a decentralized manner. So that's what we are trying to achieve here. Again, it's super early days for Web3 in general, for us in particular. Like I would say, if we had to compare to Web2, we are in 2004, 2005 of Web3. So we have no clue. Everyone in this call has no clue what's going to happen in the next 3-4 years. Maybe Andy's the most futuristic guy.
Lee Candiotti there in the comments, who's like just firing away all of these like amazing sort of notes. Lee, I had no idea you were like a Web3 guru. Why did you not say I would have brought you in on the call, sir?
You can. I mean, you can pull
everyone. I've tried. Lee doesn't want to come on. He's like resistant.
Come on, Lee.
Which I totally get it as well. But follow Lee Candiotti. He seems to know what he's talking about here. That's really interesting. Two things that's actually just to connect it to the audience that might be familiar to it. If you can track contributions, that's actually very similar to, for instance, to how you might look at a developer's GitHub profile, for instance, which is an example of, you know, a non-CV related way of verifying what this person is doing, because they're contributing to open source stuff. You can kind of see whether the sort of how active they are, whether these contributions have been accepted, etc., etc. It is a record of work. And generally speaking, what we're trying to say with Web3 is that should apply to almost anybody, irrespective of the type of work that they're doing. It should basically be trackable for their contributions, so you can actually tell for real what's going on, rather than accept their word for it because they're a great interviewer, or you know they've got some other way to persuade you. And the second element seems to be this degree of strength of quality of connections, which you can verify by whether people are actually staking, putting a stake towards certain types of people. I think LinkedIn is a good example of how the LinkedIn data is a little bit weaker, because we can do a network graph of LinkedIn, but it can't tell you the quality of the relationship between different connections. Like I'm connected to 30,000 people on LinkedIn. The quality of those connections is hugely variable. Right, at least 29,500 of them, I have no clue who they are. So the quality of that connection is quite weak. Whereas a couple of them, I do know who they are, and the quality is stronger. But LinkedIn can't tell you that information. So maybe there's other ways in which we can kind of see this happen. Folks, we've lost Andy for a moment, which is actually a perfect time for us to do what we always do on this show. We're talking about connections, and it is very important that everyone is, I think, very connected with other people that are interested in this topic. Brainfood Live is a conversation starter. It's never should be a conversation stopper. We have to come off air in about 15 minutes or so. We shouldn't be in a situation where basically the conversation ends when we're off air. So why don't everybody take a moment, take your LinkedIn profile. That's all we've got right now. Take your LinkedIn profile and share it in the comments stream, in the chat stream there. If you watch it on LinkedIn, share it in the comments thread, and then just connect to everybody who's also there. And then hopefully by the time you walk away from this call, you might have half a dozen more people that you can talk to about blockchain, Web3, and the future of work. That hopefully is a better, sort of a decent outcome for everybody, other than just letting this conversation slide away. Okay, I'm going to try and get Andy back. He may just have an issue here. Remove, bring him back on screen. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing your thing. By the way, like I say, I would otherwise share my LinkedIn, but I can't actually accept any more connections, I'm afraid to say.
That's stupid, you know, like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's totally.
We're talking about Web3, right? You should own your profile. Why is it capped at whatever number of connections? Doesn't make any sense.
From an engineering point of view, it doesn't make any sense either. Like, why 30,000? Like,
but who made that decision? Did you make that decision?
Nobody knows. It's like,
I mean, you could make that decision if it was your decision to make.
Yeah.
But it isn't, unfortunately.
That's right. And you know what? The perverse thing is, it makes you into a really like terrible person, because you then have to delete people, right? And like that's horrible. It's like I'm like doing a filter saying, all right, who don't I like? I think Collins. Let's get rid of all Collins. Get rid of them.
Yeah, but that's okay.
And that's like, okay, they're gone, and then you have to move to the next name. It's really quite a negative thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, cool. I think we have lost Andy, but that's not a major issue. Well, hopefully he can come back. Andy, just check your invite. Let's talk about smart contracts very quickly before we talk about DAOs. Smart contracts, what is that, and why is it better than a non-smart contract? Any thoughts?
I mean, it's not a big of a deal. Like Solidity is very close to JavaScript. You know, it just the biggest difference in taking a step back here. Ines, maybe you can help me out here. But when Bitcoin appeared, it has basically I wouldn't see Bitcoin as a money, more like a substitute of gold, or gold for crypto, something like that. And it's very limited in the utility that it can do. There's been some recent progress on Bitcoin, that there's going to be more utility around it, but the speed of development around Bitcoin is really, really slow. And so Ethereum appeared in 17, I believe. Well, they had been working on it before that, and they did bring a lot of utility into the blockchain. You can build other things than just crypto, cryptocurrency. And so the way to do it was through this Solidity and smart contracts. That's pretty much it. Smart contract is a file called .sol, S-O-L, and smart contracts can interact with each other. And once is on chain, that's it. It's on chain. There's some smart contracts that can evolve as well, so that you can make changes. But we're talking about distributed systems. When you want to make a change to a distributed system, it takes some time to distribute in the system. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully I haven't oversimplified it, or
no, you just made it more complicated, man. But from what I understand, basically it's a programmable contract, right? So most of us have the kind of non-programmable contract. It's literally words on text that we have to physically sign often. Once we've signed that, if people want to activate their contract, someone's going to have to interpret it and then do something with it. Whereas a smart contract actually is a program that is going to execute a number of things, and if someone breaches it or whatever, it will be automatically.
It sucks.
Something
it sucks a lot. Like we at Talent Gold, we spent considerable amount of money in security. That's a big difference for a Web2 startup. Like we do spend a lot of money on security. Maybe Web2 startups back in 2004 or 2005 they were doing that. I don't know. But yeah, that's right. Once it's on chain, it's harder to change it. By the sheer concept of it, but at the same time, it facilitates a lot of things. So, for instance, payroll. Okay, so that's a pretty obvious evolution of where crypto is going to make a difference, right? Big difference. Automatizing it, making it smart. Now, Fem, regarding your comment, yeah, there's the risk that they are rigorous, but that's the default scenario. You can have like upgradable smart contracts. Okay, so and that can be predicted as well. But yeah, it's programmed, and in true essence, that would be better. But I can see some ways that it's not.
No, maybe a little bit of background, because this is something that really interests me from the HR and people ops perspective. Like, for instance, this is how I see the smart contract. Let's put it into a tenant. You're the landlord, I'm the tenant. We have a smart contract. I pay my rent on the first of the month. Once the rent is in, smart contract said, here's your door code, you can enter your house. If let's say COVID, and I get paid later, or I'm not in time, normally I go to my tenant or to my landlord and say, hey, listen, these are the circumstances. Can I pay a bit later? Landlord said, yes, all fine. With a smart contract, if I don't pay on that first of the month, I cannot enter my house. And this is, I see a lot of pluses in smart contracting and everything around it for HR. But if I now look at, a employment contract, there can be, you have a lot of if this, then that. That's basically contract. If, then. Agreement, consequence. But then the human aspect and everything, that life that happens around it, how do you see that, with smart contracting, HR, people operations? What is your take on that? Because it's not that.
I think we need to move into a world where there's this kind of where most people are working as freelancers in a gig economy rather than in jobs. So the job is deconstructed into different tasks. Any of our jobs can be deconstructed into different tasks, and sometimes it's better that this group does it than this group for groups of tasks. In that context, the digital smart contracts are really useful. With smaller tasks. With really difficult creative ones, we'll never use smart contracts, right? So it depends on the task, but you've got to move forward a couple of steps into this world where there's less permanent salaried employees and smaller organizations. And I think that's more helpful for understanding the impact of Web3.
On that note, though, just to, I want to move on to DAOs real quick. But I think Fem has made a really interesting point as to how smart a smart contract might be. It's smart in the sense it doesn't require human interaction; it will automatically do it. But can you actually program every single if-then scenario into it so that it covers all the bases? Answer is no. So there's going to be scenarios where that's going to not work out based on an unstable world, for instance. So one of the problems we have with automation generally is that it's trying to do so. Automation is fantastic for efficiency when the external environment is predictable. But where the external environment is unpredictable, that's when automation can be potentially dangerous. So I think it's a lesson for us to say that, look, all technology comes with pros and cons. And as Pedro mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of, fumbling our way forward as we should do, but we don't have all the solutions straight away. Let's move on to DAO real quick. So we're running really short on time. What is a DAO? Can you give us some examples of what this is and why is it important? Let's go to you, Anish. You've already introduced acting a DAO for us. So explain to us the technical bits as to why this is and how does it work as a joint ownership and stuff like that.
Yeah, basically it has to do a lot with what we have been talking. So DAO is decentralized autonomous organization. The decentralization and autonomous part, it's allowed by smart contracts. So we have the more technical side where smart contracts allow people to come together with a purpose and then this make decisions and then of course develop smart contracts, and also the voting part, the governance part, for example, where decisions are made by the members that usually hold the token. There's there is DAOs that Uniswap that's quite big, or there is DAOs much smaller like Athena DAO, where in our case we are an investment DAO. So basically DAOs are organizations that usually come together around a purpose. They have a token and that token is sold to members or given to members, and then decision making is done based on that token. What we are seeing right now is like a number of like DAOs with different purposes being created. I think we are still in the 0.01 moment of DAOs. We still have a long way to go before we really understand like how can we make them more efficient, how can we really scale their impact. But I think like we have seen some promising or like DAOs being created with some real world impact.
You know, I can see certainly DAOs being almost like hybrid organizations that will have a DAO element to it. But it might also have influence from other spaces. I remember speaking. I was in Berlin a couple of months ago. I was actually this year, and I encountered a recruitment organization that had basically their recruiters operating in a decentralized, autonomous, acephalous, if you like, organization. And they were rewarded based on their activities, which is, okay, are you speaking to candidates? Yes. Are you getting this type of a response back from candidate ratings? Are you qualifying them? Are you putting them through process, etc.? They weren't employees of the organization, but they're all stakeholders of the DAO. And they were hence then rewarded from doing those activities. Because the overall organization recognized, look, if we speak to enough candidates, they would hire them for tech. If they were speaking enough candidates and bringing them into process, overall, it means that they're going to be delivering very good candidates to their end customers. But the end customers, as I understand, they were still being billed as a normal recruitment agency. So the end result still was at the end a placement fee, which I thought was amazing, because there needs to be a join between Web 2 and Web 3, or Web 2 and even Web 1, or Web 3 and even zero web, because there's companies out there that require services that might be serviced by Web 3 type organizations. How do you do that? There needs to be some organization that's prepared to basically drop back into the past. Anyway, really interesting organization. Let me dig out who that is. And I'll share with you.
I think there is one called Braintrust. Braintrust is a talent marketplace, and I think they do a very interesting bridge between Web 2 and Web 3, where they not only want you as talent to get access to jobs, but also share on the success of the platform. So I think like it's actually a very good example of what we are talking about, because like they create incentives for you to bring more talent, for you to do, but they also bring more talent, but also to do some parts of the jobs, like being an ambassador, for example, check the references of other talent in the platform. So I think that's a good example of what you are mentioning.
Yeah, can you share the link into the chat stream, Ines? That would be really interesting. You know what? Do you think Brainfood should be a DAO, folks? What do you reckon? Let's just distribute this out.
Yes.
I want to release myself from the pain of carrying this thing around. Just like get everyone involved, reward them for activities. People who are promoting, why are you not rewarded for that? If you're writing great stuff, it's get published. That's amazing. You should get rewarded for this. That would be a really cool thing. Because one of the things I've struggled with is trying to figure out how to reward all these amazing supporters that of Brainfood that I can't really track, I can't attribute, I don't know half the time. Like lots of people recommend, say, the newsletter or the podcast or whatnot, but they do it in a way that I can't see. And I just think that's a shame, because they've really helped. But it's not visible to me, so I can't actually do anything about it. So yeah, maybe that's a future for us. Who knows? Okay, let's go to questions real quick, because we need to answer these. Cherry, thank you for saying that we've answered it already. That's great. Let's go to the first one. This is Sylvia. Sylvia saying, what do you think about the implications of blockchain integrated with talent intelligence, so to promote skill-based decisions, not based on CVs? So talent intelligence, are we familiar with the term? It's basically trying to kind of understand the sort of distribution of skills geographically, and also, I guess, moving away from credentialism and more through capability. Anyone want to answer this? Fem, do you want to give this a shot?
Yeah, absolutely, because it really resonates with what I did when I first entered the blockchain Web3 world. What I've learned here is that even if you look at Vitalik, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, the kid was 18 or 19, dropped out of school, had little to no credentials that we could follow up, but he wrote code, which you can look at. I can, even with checking credentials, I can have this amount of experience. But if you look at blockchain, crypto, Web3, it's your way of thinking. I think it opens up the world to new skills, not necessarily to your standard education, standard work experience. And when work comes decentralized, you will be doing a bit here and a bit there and a bit there. So how I personally feel, and I'm doing that already, trying to step away from CVs as much as I can, have the interaction and conversation, and look at what people do. When it comes to marketing, look at what they write. When it comes to engineering, well, not me personally, but look at the code that they write. See what people do instead of what people say they done.
Yeah, and I guess the broad kind of view of it is if the work that they've done is on chain, then that's already pre-verified, so to speak. So that's where that trust layer goes up. Okay, Lee's saying, okay, how to surf in Nazare? I think it's okay, isn't it? I mean, it's the biggest waves in the world. I'm not sure. I haven't been there, mate. I have no clue. Let's go to the next question. Thank you, Lee. And we go to Camille. Camille saying, okay, isn't this going to discriminate the candidates and less access to technology? That's a legitimate point, isn't it? I mean, one of the things about basic CVs and stuff like this, like most people have the ability to produce that. How many people can actually get on chain? I mean, broad numbers, like how many people are on chain right now? Maybe, or doing something on blockchain, 5 million, maybe something like that globally.
It's not an issue because, we just talked, well, it's an issue, but it's not that huge of an issue. A lot of people in less privileged regions, they use mobile and they use crypto. Crypto is more native for them than it is for any of us in here. So in a way, it's actually more discriminate for people like us that we're not crypto native, and for us it's only an opportunity, not a need. So actually it's good that we're using more Web3 tech.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. I think because blockchain generally in Web3 is a fairly new kind of emergent set of ideas and technology, so to speak, it kind of has a sense that it's like more distant. It's harder for people to access. But in fact, we shouldn't forget that accessibility on existing recruitment systems and processes is also very constrained. For instance, you look at CVs, that's an academic document. To produce that CV, you require someone who's basically, it's optimized for someone who's been to university, is literate, has access to a keyboard, can type properly, all those types of things. And we don't kind of factor that in to the way we work. So the argument here, Camille, is that we probably have never been particularly accessible. So maybe a blockchain or Web3 can equalize all of that. Anyway,
people won't
folks,
know they're using blockchain. They're just using an app. Now they don't know how Uber works, do they? No one understands all the tech apart from Pedro. But they won't know blockchain's behind the app. So,
well, that is the next stage. It's like, how do you kind of distribute it in such a way that it's accessible to most people? And there's still barriers to entry there. Anybody who's been dealing with any kind of it's still sort of the edge of people who are involved in blockchain is definitely not mainstream, and it's definitely people that are more tech centric. So the big challenge here is how do we burst out of that sort of segment and make sure my mum can get involved in it. It's not impossible, right? My mom watches YouTube. I wouldn't have thought that would be possible 10 years ago, but she does that now. So at some point, this will happen. Anyway, we are out of time, folks. So we do have to be back at the conference. So thank you very much for watching, all of us. I hope you've enjoyed it. I want to thank our guest, Inesh. Thank you very much for joining us. Pedro, thanks for joining us also. Fem, great to see you and meet you. And Andy, great to see you also. Whoever's going to the conference, I'll see you there later. Everybody else, if you've enjoyed this show, make sure you follow the channel. We do this every Friday. Next week, we're going to be talking about Discord. How do you source and recruit on Discord? We have no idea. Well, some people do. They're going to come in and help us talk about it. So make sure you register for that show. Okay, that's about it. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you later. Wasn't that great, everybody? I think it was. All right, I'm out of here. See you next week, folks.